The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Kiwi.
The new book from Kevin Biggar is called Escape to the Pole. Two Kiwi guys sled to the South Pole, dodging crevices, starvation, and marriage. Goodness me. It was Kevin Biggar and his mate Jamie Fitzgerald. This isn't the first adventure they've been on either. In 2003, they rowed across the Atlantic and set a record in 40 days and 5 hours. Kevin Biggar is on the line this morning. Good morning to you, Kevin.
How are you?
Very, very well, thank you. It was, in fact, 2 years ago, almost to the day, that I had you on the show to talk about awesome adventures of a fat boy rower.
Fantastic, yeah, and that's how long it's taken to write the next book.
Yeah, and you've obviously kept the weight off.
No, I'm just sitting at Mum's now, actually tucking into some fruit cake. I mean, that's the thing, when you go down and you do this trick, you starve yourself, and so I tell you what, food looks pretty good.
Yeah. Were you addicted after the Atlantic rowing expedition? Were you addicted to this idea of pushing yourself to the limit?
Yeah, I think we were. That's a great question. I think it was that everything that would have seemed hard before seemed easier now. Like a walk to the South Pole before I did the Atlantic, would have seemed very, very hard. In fact, I actually looked at it back then, and it seemed something that was sort of out of my reach. But then I think when we came back from the race, Jamie and I knew that the one thing we were good at was being able to pull heavy things for a long way, and that's quite a good skill that you need when you're down there.
Yeah. So the impossible becomes possible, really.
Yeah, it certainly does. And in that kind of aspect, we knew we could put together an expedition. We knew we could handle the logistical side and the training and the sponsorship. So yeah, there's sort of the whole world opened up in terms of adventure.
So, you could have set yourself the dream, I suppose, to climb Everest or do something like that. Why the South Pole?
Well, for me, I've always had a fascination, or for a very long time, with Scott and Shackleton, and I'm sure lots of people listening have read his books, and I think you can't help, to read about his, the end and what happened to Scott, how he died in his tent, and all the amazing adventures that they had down there, and not think, well, that must be an amazing place to go to, as long as you don't end up the same way that he did.
Or even Shackleton's adventures.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah,
they were extraordinary.
Yes. In fact, but they're so bleak, though. I wouldn't want to recreate them.
I mean, he was basically lost. Well, not lost, but is stuck for 2 years.
He was down there on that amazing small boat trip, to South Georgia. But of course, Shackleton on an earlier trip got to 97 miles off the pole.
Yeah.
And I talk a lot about these guys. Because when you're down there, you certainly think about them, because you're having to operate the same way that they are. You're using the same sorts of tents, the same sorts of stove. I mean, sure, it's you've got your 100 years advance in terms of the other equipment, but you're having to, at the end of the day, you're just having to pull a heavy sled for a long way, and so you're having to do it hard like them, and actually we found ourselves making some of the mistakes that they made, and doing some of the things that they did. Like Scott managed to put a hole in his tent for his stove, for example, and tells a very funny story about how he was unpacking a sled and the wind whipped the clothes out and blew them off, and that's the same thing happened to us in the first week. Right,
because the wind is fierce, right?
It is fierce. It's blowing, and it blows down from the pole, so you're walking into it the whole time.
Yeah.
You're walking, that's the tricky thing. It's not just that it's cold, it's that you're walking into this wind, and you're walking up a hill as well, because the South Pole's at 10,000 feet.
Was there any kind of resistance from the powers that be, the authorities in Antarctica against you doing this?
No, not at all. Things have changed a little bit now, in that I think in the Wild West days, in the 90s, there was a few issues with private expeditions who got themselves into problems down there. Then they'd rely on other people to help them out. The rule is now that you have to be completely self-sufficient in terms of your any sorts of evacuation that you might need.
Right.
So we ended up paying a huge amount of money to have a plane on standby. To come and pick us up.
So there was someone with a cushy job of just hanging out
in base camp. Absolutely, yeah. With some whiskey, waiting for the phone to ring. Yeah.
So I imagine a fair bit of training involved.
Yeah, in fact, some of your audience may have seen a strange guy and now thinking, so that's what he was doing. Yeah, you walk around the streets. Well, the thing is you have to drag a sled a long way, and so you recreate that by, well, in our case, dragging a set of car tyres and you're down the street. And that creates a lot of funny looks.
Yeah, I'd imagine. And I'm just on our video stream at the moment showing some footage from the ICE program hosted by
great.
Marcus Lush, where he covered your story as well. But you consulted a pretty legendary New Zealander on this one as well.
Yeah, we were very fortunate. Sured had been the patron of our Atlantic race, and he kindly agreed to be the patron of our expedition. And it was a great fit because it was 50 years from his expedition. When he went down there in 1956 to 58, he was supposed to be laying out supplies with his tractors, his Massey Ferguson tractors, for this English expedition that was coming from the other side, but he cheekily went all the way to the pole himself. And so Sured agreed to be our sponsor, and we had some wonderful morning teas with him where he would talk about his stories from down there. The best one he told was he said it got so cold on some days that the fuel would freeze in the lines of their tractors. He said they would on days like that they would draw straws. The guy with the short straw would get the blowtorch, and it would be his job to unthaw the fuel lines. He said while the rest of them stood well back.
Yeah, I can imagine. Goodness me. Well, and obviously no problems like that for you because you weren't mechanical at all.
No. You have your sort of your own issues there. The sleds held up well. The issue is that it's very rough. The walking is very, very rough, and so when the weather's fine, you can see it, and you're okay. You can sort of weave around the rough stuff. When the weather is whiteout, which it was about once every week for us, you're walking. I think if you've been on a ski slope in conditions like that, you know what it's like. You can't see the snow that's coming up, and we're often having our sleds falling over, and that's a pain in the neck because you have to get yourself out of your skis, go back, right them, and then get back into your skis. Yeah.
And was it just the two of you? Because because you filmed some of it as well. Did you?
Yeah, that's those shots that you get where there's both of us in the scene. They're the most pain in the neck shots to get. You got to walk out, put the camera down, walk back, and then walk past. That's why there's not many of them because it's a real luxury to get that shot. One of the main things when you're down there is that you're on a timetable. I mean, you're not racing against anyone else, but you're racing against the clock that you've set yourself. Yeah. We had 50 days worth of food to get to the pole, and if you don't get there in 50 days, then you've got to make that up somewhere. So we had definite mileage targets to make each day, and we're only just making them. And for the first couple of weeks, we were well behind where we should have been.
And how do your feet feel? Because being a tourist, say walking around Tokyo, I found it extraordinarily difficult on the old feet, and that's just walking around some city streets. But how do your feet feel after walking to the pole?
Yeah, look, I saw someone's feet who had walked to the pole, and the whole front base of her foot had fallen off. I'd never seen anything like it. It was like she had skinned her foot. But here's the thing: it's going to be a lot of walking involved, and so you train for lots of walking involved. And so our boots are fantastic. We have amazing socks. We had, for those of you who are interested, it was Bridgedale socks. And we have a kind of a plastic sock as well, which, as well as keeping the water from escaping into the boot, where it would just turn into ice, the sort of the evaporation that comes from your foot, it creates kind of a lubrication layer. Yeah. So that you can work your foot and you don't get any blisters.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's quite handy.
Yes.
And as a sort of a side script to the story, I suppose, you were having a little bit of an early life crisis. And a proposal of marriage on the horizon as well.
That's right. And I think that's the thing that makes this book, the Escape to the Pole, a little bit different from other adventure books in that it's a bit of a romance as well. So it starts off that way. I come back from the Atlantic race, and my girlfriend and I just going awesome, but then I see that things aren't going to keep on the way they are, and as I say in the book, it's at some point for her, no answer will be the answer to the question that hasn't been asked, and so I needed to do something, and I really found it hard to get myself over the line. Though I knew I was with a fantastic girl, the one I should settle down with, but it's hard to give up all that freedom that you think you have, not that you ever have it or you use it, but I'm sure there are lots of guys out there in the same situation like that, just to get themselves over that little hump. And so I thought, a nice cleansing little trip to Antarctica would sort me out, and it did. It was fantastic for that.
Yeah, some people go on a road trip to Paihia or something. Finally, is there a anticlimax when you get to the pole with the fact that there's nothing there? I mean, there's no marker at the pole, is there?
Oh, well, for the North Pole, that's absolutely true, and I think you're right. If you get to the North Pole, it's just another GPS coordinate. You get to the South Pole, it's a big place. The South Pole is like a town. It sounds strange, but there's a big American base there. There must be 200 or 300 people there working during the during the summertime. If you go to the website escapetothepole.com and look under the photos page, you'll see the pictures of us holding up the flag, and you'll see a thing that looks like a ski lodge in the background.
Because on the front of the book, it's got you jumping up next to the flag, but there's nothing in the background. Yeah, no, that's because we laid out, because we were supposed to do the trip to the pole and back again, and we laid out a supply caches for ourselves on the way. And when we, as you'll read in the book, I'm not giving too much away, but for various reasons, we didn't make the trip back. We had to go out and get the supply dumps. And so that's the picture of me. And the GPS read, I had two GPSs, and they started to read wrong. All right.
And the first one took me to the wrong place. The second one, I found this flag.
I think that's the solar winds that can throw off the GPS. I've heard anyway.
I wonder whether it's that or it's they get a bit sketchy around the poles.
Yeah.
Because the way they do the maths. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it is a great story, obviously. Go and get the book. It is called Escape to the Pole. It is out now. Kevin Biggar has been my guest, and he has been the explorer as well. Thanks so much, Kevin.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Got a track now.